Hello, and welcome to the TMG Fireside Chat. The premise of the TMG Fireside Chat is to bring leaders across the fire protection and life safety industry together and talk about industry-wide challenges and highlight solutions that will help to solidify the industry's foundation while preparing for growth through new technologies and strategies. In this episode, we sit down with Caleb Armbrust, the Director of Membership for the NFSA. We're able to meet at the annual conference held back in May in Austin, Texas. And during our conversation, we were able to talk about the NFSA and who they are, where the NFSA fits in our industry and the long history they have. Caleb also talks about his role as the Director of Membership and also shares his view on the market. The strength of the fire sprinklers industry as a whole, career opportunities, shares a little bit about his path, and then the role of technology as we move the industry forward. I hope you enjoy our conversation and you're able to take away one or two things that you can apply in your professional and personal life. And with that, I welcome you to our podcast, the TMG Fireside Chat.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Fireside Chat, where we talk about fire protection industry related topics and events. And this week, I am at the National Fire Sprinkler Association Annual Forum and Expo in Austin, Texas, and have the privilege to sit down with Caleb Armbrust. So, Caleb, welcome.
Thanks, John.
Yeah, thanks.
Great to be here.
Thanks for joining us. Caleb is, we've talked offline, and as the viewers would know, the intent of this podcast is to talk about things that are going on across the industry, challenges that we're facing and areas that are growing, and organizations that really help, solidify the industry or help advocate for what we do. So, can you tell us a little bit about, the role of NFSA in fire protection and what you do at NFSA?
Sure. So, NFSA was founded in 1905 and has a pretty storied history. At our office, we have a timeline of major fires and legislation, along with the code changes that were passed after each of them. And you can almost track NFSA's involvement in each of those things, leading to more fire protection and better fire protection. And so, again, for 118 years, we've really been there to be the voice of the fire sprinkler industry, which is kind of our tagline. Really trying to help make a stronger industry, which we happen to be in a space where the stronger our industry is, the safer the world is.
Absolutely.
So we like to say, a stronger industry, a safer world. Yeah. And so my role specifically at NFSA is as the Director of Membership. Mm-hmm. I like to say I get to sort of be the custodian of treasure. 118 years, obviously everybody here is replaceable. I like to remind all of us that, because when you're 118 years old, everybody's been replaced at some point.
A number of people before you.
Which lends itself to sort of this institutional recognition and the reality that NFSA is an institution in our industry and has helped to shape the industry and the direction it's gone. And we've had several companies that have been members for 65 years or more. And it's just neat to, like I said, to be a custodian of that treasure, and those relationships between the company and the association has been a real privilege. And to try to bring on new members, particularly contractors, into that relationship between the companies and the association.
Right. One of the things that this was the first NFSA conference I've been to in 10 years. Prior to my role at Hiller, I worked at Tyco, and the Tyco is what brought me to the NFSA conferences. And what I realized this week, or remembered this week, but what I realized 10 years ago was the strength of the relationships between the contractors. You really see a brotherhood across a lot of these family businesses or bigger businesses where they're very supportive of each other, which I think speaks to the legacy of the association. And all those folks that have been here before us. And now the duty that you have every day, but as a fire protection industry professional, how can I support the association as well. But
yeah, and I'm so glad you came, because the conference, when you try to ask people, well, what is NFSA, it's really hard to bottle it up, because I could go any direction and talking to somebody about why they should join, but the best way is to come to a board meeting or to come to a conference, and that's sort of an open invitation to people that be thinking about getting involved. Is just come to a board meeting, reach out, or come to a conference, because to your point, you see guys that actually are pretty fierce competitors on the manufacturing side and the contracting side, and they recognize that the association is that institution that enables them the opportunity to come together and talk about the industry.
Absolutely.
Right? Not company A, company B, but how do we take this tide and lift it for everybody?
Right. No, that's great. It's great. A couple of things that we do with regard to our podcast, kind of get things rolling. When you think of sports, not sure if you're baseball. You live in Kentucky. Are you native to Kentucky?
I was born and raised in Columbus, Ohio.
Okay.
So that should probably answer the sports question.
So, all right. All right, so what's college team then?
So it's got to be the Ohio State Buckeyes.
Ohio
I'm not an alum, but I grew up 20 minutes from there, and I know that probably just tuned out a good chunk of the audience, but that's okay.
That's right. I think most of the Michigan fans now are gone completely.
Well, they've won a couple times now, so they're back pretending it's a rivalry.
Yes. Well, unfortunately, there's only you and I. You throw out the OH. I'm not sure.
I won't do that, because I know you live in Alabama. So.
Very good. What about food? We've been here now for almost 4 or 5 days.
Sure.
In Austin, obviously a ton of barbecue all over the place. This Tex-Mex, Mexican taco restaurants, every 5 feet. But outside of being in Austin, what's your favorite food?
I got 4 little kids, so I feel like I'm a connoisseur of the chicken tenders at various restaurants at this point in life. But
and mac and cheese.
And mac and cheese, I make a mean mac and cheese. Yeah. But I think honestly, I'm probably a steak guy with all the fixings. Yeah. I mean, if I picked my last meal on earth, I'd probably pick a steak with the cream spinach and the scalloped potatoes and a nice Cabernet and the whole thing.
Yeah, very good. I'd like that too. In high school, how would your classmates, what would they have voted you for? Most likely to?
So I used to joke with people, because I was homeschooled. So there's like a little social barrier here maybe, but we'll get past it together. But yes. So I was a class of 1, obviously. Yeah. So we didn't really have elections. So I don't know what they would have voted me for. Yeah. I did graduate from public high school. I went my last 2 years. I went to a vocational program for professional firefighting. Yeah. And EMT. So I guess they voted me the assistant chief of the class. So I don't know if that counts.
All right. Well, I think I know some homeschoolers growing up as well, and most likely to do whatever the heck you wanted to do.
There you go.
Right? The world's your oyster.
There you go.
Go figure it out. All right. So how'd you end up in fire protection? What got you to where you're at today?
I think I probably have a little bit of a different story than some folks. Yeah. Mine doesn't start out with, I walked into a bar and somebody said they do sprinklers. Right. But so I was the kid for a long time that never lost the dream, is how I describe myself. I grew up, I wanted to ride big red trucks, like I think we all did. Yeah. I got plugged in with a couple fire departments when I was in high school. I think my story speaks to the power of mentorship, or just people further along taking an interest in somebody that's younger. Yeah. There's one guy at the fire station that we moved. He was across the street, and he vouched for me and let me ride along with them some, and then told me I needed to go get my licenses. So I went in high school to get my firefighter 1 and 2 and my EMT basic. And then again, the instructor there gave me the opportunity to come down downtown Columbus and ride with one of the inner city engines and medic units. In high school, and then when I was in college, I went to Eastern Kentucky to get my degree in fire admin, is what it started out as. And somewhere around my sophomore year, I was standing in a fire station in Columbus and just went, wow, I'm the kid that just lost the dream. Yeah. I don't think I'm going to do this. And we could talk at some other time about calling and sort of how all that works out. I lost that call, and it was very disorienting. You're getting a degree in it. This is what you've always wanted to do. Right. Again, a great advisor at Eastern Kentucky, a guy named Greg. I had talked to him and said, college isn't that hard. Some of the fire classes were more fun at that point. And he said, we'll switch to the engineering track and it'll get hard. And so I switched. I had struggled in math, but I switched to the engineering track my sophomore year and did calc and physics and the whole engineering degree, engineering tech degree, full disclosure to the Maryland listeners here. And graduated with that 4 years. And I thought that if you take the fire protection pie, I thought it was big red trucks over here, or I'll just say Jensen Hughes over here was the only real fire protection engineering firm that I knew of. They were, I guess, Rolf Jensen at the time. And I missed the entire contracting part of the pie and the manufacturers. And so I just say to the audience, there's a lot that doesn't compute to a 21-year-old, even one that's interested in it. And so I got out, I went to Europe, and then anyway, did a couple jobs, got married, had some kids, was running a company in Maryland when Shane Ray, who I had the privilege of interning for when he was a fire chief, when I was a sophomore in college, and rather I was a junior. So I was a junior in college, my junior and senior summers, and he called, and Miss Vicky actually is the one that was like, well, Caleb lives in Maryland. I've kept up with him, like, give him a call. Because Shane was looking for a tight end that knew fire sprinklers, I guess, and he called, and I looked it up, and I remember the first time I was going through the member list and saw Dalmatian, up in the Midwest. I go, I remember seeing the dogs, I guess we call them the sham dogs now, all over the trucks everywhere. And went, oh my gosh, there's companies out there that I had understood business by that point. Went, wow, how did I miss this? And I dove into the association. That was 6 years ago.
Okay.
It's kind of how so I got a technical-ish degree, and now I don't do really anything technical in my role.
It's interesting. I think it highlights, again, how doors open, right? I like the reference you made about line of sight, right? Before it was the red trucks or engineering, and not necessarily looking at the contracting piece and understanding the role that the contractors play.
Huge role.
In the market, especially the relationship between engineering, contracting, and the fire department, right?
Yep.
So I think that's an interesting perspective because I've got kids in their early 20s and nephews that are in high school, and when I talk to them about fire protection, they just kind of like glaze over a little bit to say, well, wait a minute. Again, they're not looking up for the sprinkler head. They're not looking around for that fire alarm panel.
No, they don't understand construction. All that goes into a project that contractors. It's like, what do you want to do? Design? Do you want to inspect? And then within design, do you like working on one project for 5 years or 2 years, or do you want to do a different project every day? Like, how are you wired? There's something in this for every sort of workplace performance type, whether it's sales, whether it's management, whether it's leading people, or and that's what's so interesting to see, that it makes it hard to sell, right? So one of the things that I came back with NFSA, and Abby Gunnels, who works with me, we were freshmen in college together, actually. And so she's sort of leading our charge to dive into this career recruitment space on behalf of the association for all the members. And one of the things we've done is got one of the local contractors in Lexington, Landmark Sprinkler. I went and talked to the branch manager and said, look, I just need any Friday morning, can you give me a blank check to find a kid and send him up here? And he, what do you mean? I told him my story. I said, if I can put them in your office for one morning, that's all it's going to take. And these kids that are studying fire are going to get it. And so we've had, I don't know, half a dozen to 10 students that are studying fire and safety engineering go, sit down, see the design guys using, I didn't do any computer design. It was all paper and hand calcs in college. And it was like, who wants to do that? And so they sit down there, they see the technology, they connect it with what they're studying. They go look at the service fab shop, they talk to the branch manager, they take a workplace performance test, and to a T, I think all of them are working in the contracting space now, following Eastern. Maybe one is in the insurance risk business, right? But before that, most of them would go, I'll go insurance, I'll try to get a master's degree, because they didn't realize the incredible opportunities that you could get with a bachelor's degree in our industry.
Right. No, plenty of opportunities. When you look at the industry as a whole, obviously construction market in the United States is strong. I know as I go to every fire industry conference, every contractor is talking about how busy they are. Can't hire enough people to keep up. Some of the best years they've ever had in running their business, and so there's a lot of energy, a lot of excitement. But from your perspective, what's your take on the industry? What's going on? I mean, where do you guys see the strengths and the growth areas?
I mean, it's been record years for sprinkler shipments.
Yeah.
So one of the things that's unique to the National Fire Sprinkler Association is our Manufacturers Council. And so all four of the manufacturers are in that council, and they share their shipment data, again, with a third party. It's blind to us. We don't know anybody's market share, don't want to, but we want to know the market. And so one of the things that we gather, the sprinkler shipment data, and I think 2019 was the first time that residential sprinklers made up more than 25% of all heads shipped.
That's interesting.
So that's a big deal.
Oh, absolutely.
And since then, even through COVID, you'd think we would have hit the wall. And what's the recovery going to look like? Is it, I forget all the letters that we were talking about that they were going to be, right? That sort of is a blank hole for all of our memories, But it's been record year after record year after record year of sprinkler shipments. And so that's pretty cool to see. Absolutely. Because all those sprinkler shipments, those are new sprinklers getting installed that obviously need to be inspected, tested, maintained. Eventually they're going to need to be replaced. And the residential piece is something NFSA and the manufacturers and contractors have invested heavily in the development of 13D and 13R and the standards for it, and then the lobbying effort to get single-family homes in the model codes, and then to try to get it adopted at the state or local levels has proved to continue to be a big battle in a place where we've invested heavily. So that was really neat to see residential, which includes multifamily and all that stuff, become such a big part of the overall shipment data.
That's great. I mean, it's reflective of the acceptance now of residential sprinklers, and also I think the healthy market of construction again, right, where it's at. I'm plugged into a lot of different, industry research data, kind of get a sense of where the growth areas are across fire, if it's fire extinguisher, fire generic suppression or alarm. And some of the data I have is showing that the U.S. fire sprinkler market is going to grow compounded growth rate of about 8 or 9% a year for the next 5 or 6 years. All right, so it takes the U.S. market today, which is about $4.3 billion, and is going to push that into the $7 billion range. I mean, it's, to me, and it's outpacing.
It's a lot of potential membership to us, John.
That's you're right about that. Good for you. You'll be working to go find all those members. But in that context, it highlights the strength of the market. Fire alarm is a little bit behind that. Suppression as a whole is even a little bit behind that as well. But directionally, I mean, sprinkler is really leading the pace. And when you talk about the shipments, record year after record year after year, the growth of residential, again, highlight all that. But what about challenges? Right? I mean, it's great that we've got all this good momentum going on, but it's not a perfect world either. So what challenges do you guys see?
I mean, the one that just pops into mind as I travel around and meet with contractors is the skilled labor shortage. So everybody would take people, but I think we're going to start to see the actual hands-on skilled labor shortage really started to kick in, right? Because it's not unique to fire protection.
No, it's not.
Call somebody to come work on anything that breaks. And they're not generally my generation. And so closing that gap, I think, guys like Mike Rowe are doing a lot of work. I give a shout out to Stanley Black & Decker and a lot of the makers scholarships that they've done. And trying to push that of, hey, look, you don't have to go get a graphic design degree. And not that that's bad if you do that, but maybe college isn't for everybody. And so I think a challenge for us as an industry, and we've done a lot with like NICET, to their credit, to create certification programs that allow people to excel and to gain knowledge and take tests and actually grow in their education of it. I think that helping people realize the opportunities in the industry is a huge challenge for us, because I think that skilled labor market is just going to get more and more competitive, and being able to have people choose fire sprinkler over HVAC or over plumbing or over mechanic, some of the other skilled trades, because we're all going to be competing for good talent, and which is where I do think, the answer to that is, like, we have a really noble mission. I mean, we save lives and property.
Absolutely.
I think those are some of the big challenges, and again, I'm not on the technical side. I talk to guys to a degree about the state of their business, and obviously the interest rate hikes are on everybody's mind. The bank failures, all the chaos in the market right now. I think that it's interesting to see. I have some friends that are in commercial real estate, and I think talking to those guys and where they are and what the rate is that they're borrowing money and what projects are getting shelved and which ones are going. It's just interesting to see. The other thing I think is really fascinating to see how far it goes is, it's not really a bifurcation of the market, but it is to a degree that you have these mega projects now that I think a few years ago, we haven't seen anything like that in the U.S. I mean, $100 million sprinkler jobs were, excuse me, what? Sort of thing. Projects going 5 years and longer, and it's really neat to see it. But there's only a handful of contractors that can take on. Maybe not even a handful. There's only a couple.
How do you deploy 1,000, installers? Right?
Yeah, skilled labor
to a
complex
job site
projects
in a, different part of the country.
and like 6 of them.
Yeah.
All right, at the volume of the product, the design, and it's really to the credit of the industry, because the part you used the word acceptance a minute ago, and our mission is the widespread acceptance.
Yeah.
So, like, you can force something in the code, and we can pound our chest that we got sprinklers required somewhere. That's great, but it's not good if homeowners that have sprinklers don't know what they are, and they live in fear of this life safety device because they watch the movies and they think they all go off at once.
They all go off at once.
So I think a huge challenge for our industry is getting people to really understand our product and be happy for it, to ask for it. I'm nearly done sprinklering my house in Lexington.
Oh, you are installing that yourself, correct?
I did. To the shock of many, I read a standard. Had a little help from Mike Jonas and Roland Asp. And a big shout out to Viking for hooking me up with the product and Blazemaster pipe. And it was a lot of fun. But I got my little kids involved with it. They were all in the attic. So all we have left to do is wire the pump. And it'll be live. But it got to the point, John, that on our piano in the living room, I have a T with the head and the cover plate and the pipe going into it. Because it was to the point that people kept well, what is that, and how does it work? That I literally just picked the prop up and here's the cover plate, it slips in here, head drops out, the deflector comes out, this active. I was like, wow, that's really cool. I had no idea. Wait, so they don't all go off then No, they don't all go off. And so I think that there's a lot of work to do educationally. I was surprised just of all the people in the industry, if we all did that, honestly. And that's what it takes. I'm not saying everybody should have a prop with orange pipe and some sprinkler heads on their piano. But, I mean, think about it. A lot of us, I didn't. I've worked for the association for 6 years and embarrassed to say that I moved homes and stuff, but that I just sprinkled my house. I could have sprinkled part of it 3 years ago, and that's a whole another podcast on, I think I should have done that, but it wouldn't have been the entire house. So I think those are some of the challenges. I know that was a little bit of a rambling.
No, I think I think it's good. I think what it highlights is awareness with regard to how do the systems operate, how are they designed, to get away from the Hollywood aspect that the whole system's going to go off. And no, it's head to head.
Yep.
Right. Where the spot of the fire is identified.
Our guys would say device to device or fire sprinkler to fire sprinkler. Yeah. Our technical guys would beat me up if I used the word sprinkler head. So.
Got it. Fully understand. Again, I'm not the technician either. All right. So the other thing I'm picking up after talking to a number of the companies this week is the shift to service.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it highlights the strength of our industry, the resilience, if you will, of the industry. When you look at the industry as a whole, you can go back to, I'll go back to 2008, 2009, 18 years ago now. And I think we learned at that point with the recession to say, hey, we have to be able to pivot.
Yeah.
All right. And those days I was at Tyco, And we saw a significant shift in our market because new construction came to a screeching halt. And the companies that survived and thrived for the next 10 years were the ones that picked up service.
Right.
We saw the same through COVID.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, we did.
Service really took off. But every owner I've talked to this week has talked about their journey to go get more and more service.
Yep.
Right. So it's been very, very interesting to see. I mean, what's your perspective on that?
Well, I was inside the bastion of higher education during the 2008 financial recession. So I remember reading about it on the cover of the USA Today in the dorm. But anyway.
Aging myself there.
Yeah, well, so most of my knowledge comes from reading the books afterwards and watching some of the movies. But absolutely service. But what was fascinating, in another job, I remember we sprinklered, we retrofitted it was a grocery store that we converted to a 10,000 square foot commercial bakery and everything. And I remember the owner asking me about it should we do this? And I said, well, like, you do it or don't do it, but if you don't do it, I'm probably not going to work here because I'm not going to explain why we changed what we were storing somewhere to not sprinkler half of our building.
Right.
Yeah, he's like, absolutely right. Life safety, let's do it.
Yeah.
But I was surprised that the installing contractor, like, I had to ask them for a quote, just like, well, what do we do with this now? Don't we have to get it? And I mean, I knew enough from like college, like,
right.
There's supposed to be maintenance with this, right? It's like, here's your pile of submittals, and it was like, well, great. What do we do now?
Right.
I had to ask for a service quote.
Right.
And they're like, yeah, sure, we can quote that. And I was like, wait, this isn't a thing. You guys don't just keep making, wow. And so then when I came to NFSA, I started asking some contractors whether they do that, and they're like, oh no, that's a totally separate part of the business, and the handoff is rough. And I'm like, why?
Yeah.
You guys are the best person to service the system. You know it, you designed it.
Absolutely.
And so in the last 6 years, to your point, I think there is a recognition and the pivot too. But yeah, we do want to do service. It's a different mentality. It's more customer centric.
Yep.
So it was surprising that we talked about this at the service trade conference in the fall. Our industry gets the rap, but it's very male dominated. Mm-hmm. And my response is, well, it's construction. We're hanging pipe in buildings, and it's really intense physical labor.
Yeah.
So, which is not to say that certain people can't do it.
Right.
But what was fascinating is to see the number of women that were on the big service companies, and the attention to detail, the customer service, so that was very neat to see that, and to watch the industry grow in that direction. Yeah. And that's one of the things I get excited about. But you have seen many more contractors pivot that way, and technology is enabling a lot of it. Actually, I think if you've got carbon copy inspection forms and you're doing that, there's a lot of liability that you're taking on with less than ideal methods to account for. Well, when we did the inspection, we documented this, we gave it to you, right? So I think that there's part of it that some of the technology that's out there now helps to enable a better quality inspection, which, and again, I've not been a contractor. The joke, I think, is that you or I could smash that sprinkler head with a hammer, and the contractor's still going to have a claim on their insurance policy. Unfortunately.
Right.
And that is a challenge that we have going forward, I think, too, by the way. And so, but yeah, everybody's pivoting to service.
And I think that, to your point, that the role that technology plays in the pivot to service is also attracting a different type of employee into the market. Like you said, you go to a service-focused conference around technology, and the room is 50-50, male to female. And a lot of those female technicians, have started in the office, may have worked in some other administrative capacity, and then have worked their way into the field.
Yeah.
Because the work is more appealing, right?
Yeah.
Again, to your point, it's customer facing, out and about.
It's normal business hours usually.
Exactly, right? And it's testing and inspecting systems. So that's part of it. And I also think I agree with you with regard to the ability, or I'll call it the ease of deploying new technology. Service trade, inspect point, are the two that I'm most familiar with. But when you look at their ability to, I'll call it plug and play, if you will, and deploy,
Yeah.
best-in-class technology to really, make sure that facility is compliant.
Yeah.
Right? It's an easy ramp, and it's easy to get out there. So it makes it an easier conversion for that installer to bolt on a service arm to take on more service business.
I mean, the other thing I think is the enforcement, right? And so you talk about if you can require it. The caveat I say here, and again, my role is membership, so I try to recruit contractors, and the service contractors are a harder sell. And I asked, well, are you doing inspections? Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, that's our business. Yeah. Okay, well, why are you doing inspections? Like in the history of the world, do people want to spend money every quarter to have you look at something that they hope to never use? Right. No, they don't. It's required of them by law. Right. And to require something by law, there's got to be a statute, there's a code, there's a standard now, 25. Yeah. It didn't just appear out of thin air. Right. And NFSA was instrumental in driving that.
Absolutely.
Because again, all these contractors come together and say, we need a standard. Like, we have to have a standard by which we're inspecting these. And the manufacturers have to be involved, the contractors have to be involved, the suppliers, right? And so that's been built over years and years and years. And without that, our ITM market is not what it is today.
Agree.
Full stop. And so when you talk about institutions that have been around for over 100 years, part of the dues, right? When I talk about, okay, if we're going to take the pie chart of your dues, part of it, I don't know what percentage quite yet, goes to the fact that we have an industry, right? Like we have standards, and we spend hundreds of thousands of dollars a year on standards meetings, on internal committee meetings, on NITMAMs, and participating in the codes process and standards development, and no one company can do that on their own.
No.
So you have to be a voice, and if we want to keep getting market share and we want to keep growing the market, part of your dues are purely that. Right. And the specific ROI on that, it's hard to quantify.
I agree. I mean, let's go back to the first point we talked about at the start of the podcast. The association's been around for 108 years, you said?
118.
118 years, all right? And the legacy of all those people before, right? And the layer after layer after layer after layer, all around safety, protecting lives and property, right? But even today, as strong as the industry is, it still comes down to the codes being enforced, living in a municipality or a state that is, mandating or driving those codes, right? And holding the compliance. And our ability, our business owners and or industry professionals' willingness to pay those dues and continue to support the association is only solidifying the foundation for that next generation that's coming in behind us.
Yep.
Right?
And protecting it. Really.
Absolutely. And ultimately make it, continue to make our workplaces or life, where we live, safer. So, all right, we'll start to wrap up. But what I do ask at every one of our podcasts is, as part of that wrap up, if you have an opportunity to work with one person who you really looked up to, right?
Man.
Someone helped you grow into the leader you are today, or had the most fun working with, who would that be and why?
Man, that's a really, really hard question. I get to work with a lot of them actually in my job. I mean, Shane, I knew him early on in my career. Super creative. I almost went to law school. It didn't. Gosh, there's a lot of guys. There's a lot of guys that aren't in this industry actually. Yeah. There's some guys I knew. There's a David Beasley, who's a former governor of South Carolina. I got to know him a few years ago, and just a fascinating, great leader. Yeah. I don't know who the one person that I would pick would be actually.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. So sometimes these questions aren't planted. So that was a cold.
There you go.
Hit them cold with it. So, all right. Well, I think we'll wrap up there. Caleb, thank you.
Yeah.
For the time, man. Really, really appreciate it. And great event this week. Fully engaged group of attendees. How many people attended here?
It was about 1,000.
1,000.
Yeah.
Very good. Great event last night with the welcome reception and blending it with the vendors and some live music.
Yeah.
and food. So that was great. And wrapping up now to get ready to head to a
Future leadership
future
reception.
leader reception as well. So really appreciate that. We're going to have contact information for the listeners to be able to reach out to you, learn more about NFSA, understanding what's going on in the sprinkler industry or whatever else it might be. And then obviously people can reach out to me specific to the industry as a whole. So
yeah, I'm really glad you came, John. Pleasure being on the podcast. And I think, I guess my parting shot would be, there's a lot for everybody in the association. That's just like, what do you want to do? Right. Who do you want to meet? Part of our job is to connect people, and millennials. My parting shot to millennials is, we don't think in terms of institutions, right? There's this push. We saw it all through the summer 2020. We're going to blow up all the institutions. Yeah. We're going to rebuild them. And I think that certainly from where I sit, being a millennial in a, let's just say, generally a sunset career role, that's how I describe it, director of membership for a national association. It's been a super unique experience to get, really the privilege to get to talk to men and women that have run large companies, and which is why I don't take the job lightly at all. Right. It's an honor, and I look at it, especially the younger people out there, that don't realize the opportunity. Some of these guys feel far off and distant, is that every one of them wants nothing more than to invest in the next generation. Absolutely. And part of the way that they do that is through the association. Yep. And so if you're a young owner of a company, it's like, join, give us a shot. Yeah. Try it out for a couple of years, but don't hammer me on, the ROI as if I'm somebody selling you a specific product. Right. I think that the trade associations have to be viewed differently than vendors of product.
Absolutely.
And I've seen that push of where guys will compare their membership dues to a truck payment. Yeah. And when that happens, I usually get up and leave because we're just not a good fit. Right. And our association's fine doing that, but there's a lot here for everybody.
Yeah. Well, to your point, it's about advocacy and stewardship. And again, it's not only about today, tomorrow, but it's for the future.
Stewardship's the key.
Yeah. So, great.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, man.
Hey guys, thank you for listening and going on this journey with us. If you enjoyed what you heard, please give the TMG Fireside Chat a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. And be sure to like, follow, and share TMG on all socials, as well as all podcast platforms. And finally, be sure to tell your friends across the fire protection industry about the TMZ Fireside Chat. Thank you and be safe.